All right, I'm going to share my screen and organize my windows a little bit. All right, we're going to let people filter on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Visible history today. Everyone here is part of history. This is our highest registration event we've ever done.
Oh, wow. I'm honored that you all want to
well, that speaks to you, Elizabeth, and not to us. So it speaks to your following in clout.
Well, thank you. You flatter me too much, but data rooms are such a scintillating topic. I don't know why people wouldn't all want to come and talk about data rooms all day.
I was just on our leadership call right before this, and I ended it with saying, I gotta go. I've got an electric factory of content that we're about to share with hundreds of people worldwide. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from. I bet we can get almost every continent, maybe not Antarctica represented here, but let us know where you're from. We're going to get started here in a second. And this is being recorded. So we will send this out. I know some of you have mentioned that question already. So yeah, we record these. We'll send out the recap usually within 24 hours and a longer form recap in the next week. If you're not subscribed to the Visible Weekly, we will definitely mention this in there. So you'll want to go on our website and subscribe to that there. Awesome. Chat is disabled. Well, thank you for letting me know. Everyone can chat now. That could be dangerous. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, let us know where you're from. Thanks for letting me know that it is disabled. I'll clean these up and we'll get started. So yeah, welcome, Elizabeth. For you that don't know, Elizabeth is the GP of Hustle Fund. She was previously at 500 Startups. She co-founded and ran an ag tech company that was acquired in 2014. I believe this is your third or fourth webinar with Visible. So thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth. It means a lot to me and to everyone here. Great. Matt on our team, he is standing by with questions and we'll be able to field your questions. We'll either try to answer them real time if it's super relevant to the slide, or we'll wait to the end. So if you have any questions, write in. We're going to try to keep this to a tight 45 minutes. As mentioned, we will go ahead and send this out to everyone at the end. So we record this, we'll send it out, and we'll send it in email in the next 24 to 48 hours. For you that don't know Hustle Fund, I think it's like the premier pre-seed fund there is. They have 3 funds now. On pace to do 100 investments this year. I think, Elizabeth, you mentioned what you have 400 portfolio companies. Pretty insane. Generalist, making $50,000 investments. Anything I'm missing here that you would love to add while you have the time to plug Hustle Fund?
It's great. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. So today we're talking data rooms. So Visible, we launched our data room product 2 weeks ago. And even just based on the attendance here and the appetite for this webinar, I think we're gonna have a lot to learn and just some fun debate and what should and should not be included, when to share it, what you should put in your data room. But maybe like just to start things off, like, do early stage startups need a data room?
Yeah, well, so unfortunately, like everything else, the answer is both yes and no. So obviously, if you are running your company and you're not raising money and you just have, your company and you're working on your company, you don't actually really need much of anything. You don't need a data room. But if you have aspirations of raising money or maybe working with a strategic partner closely, then the answer is yes. And to what extent your data room is involved or complex will depend a lot on who you're raising from and also what stage of company you're in. And I think we'll probably dig into both of those as we go along. So I suspect many of the people who are here want to raise money at some point, and so you will need a data room.
You mentioned partner. What are some examples if you're not raising money from someone, but like you meant like, are there examples of like a partner that would need access to a data room?
Yeah, so a data room for a partner might look pretty different. So for example, let's say that you are working with Microsoft or somebody like that as a partner, or if you have vendors, then you may need to supply information like tax forms or something along those lines. So that would be another form of a data room. It would look very different from an investor data room. If you're going through an acquisition, or at some point you have plans to be acquired or something like that, you will need a data room. And so I think data room, like when I was an entrepreneur, I thought, oh gosh, data room, that sounds super scary. Like, it sounds very complicated, but really a data room in short is an area where you can put a whole bunch of files and you're going to share out that link to a whole slew of folks. And it's actually very helpful to you as an entrepreneur, because then you don't need to, prepare the same docs over and over. If you just prepare it once, then you can share that link with a whole slew of people and just be done with it. Yeah. So that's really what it is in short.
What about, so you have 400 portfolio companies that are to do 100 deals this year. That means you're seeing thousands of companies. Like what percent, if you had to benchmark it, what percent of folks don't have a data room? And then I guess, like, what are the consequences of that? Like, will you not invest if someone, is it fair to say you're not going to invest because someone has a data room, but you might not invest if they don't have one?
Yeah, so when we make offers, I would probably say over 90% of the time, the company has not yet prepared a data room. And we as a firm cannot send the money until they prepare the data room. So if you don't yet have one, then it means that there's a bit of a delay, because even if an investor makes you an offer, and specifically VCs, angels may not care, but VCs, if they're making you an offer, VCs have to go through their audits, and they are scrutinized by their investors who want to make sure they're investing in legit companies. I think many of you may have seen some of the scandals of somewhat recent fame where, VCs may not have collected that information. That's coming back to bite them. So that's why VCs asked for a data room. And so we won't send you the money unless you have one.
Yeah. Awesome. And so, but it's not a big deal if you don't have one, by the way. You can create it and get access to it. It's going to slow things down, but like, don't panic thinking you need to go create one like this second. I think that's probably
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you know where the term came from? I actually learned this like yesterday, by the way. I didn't know where the word data room came from.
No, where does it come from?
It used to be like, I'm talking way back before computers. If you were like doing an IPO or financial documents, they would put you basically like in a vault, like a secure room where you could look at confidential documents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it came back from like issuance way back in the day, and that became virtual data room, which I thought which is interesting. Talking about like must-haves. So yeah, we launched ours 2 weeks ago, but we've actually had a couple thousand folders and files already uploaded to our data room products. So we're actually able to infer some insights already. The top 5 things that we see are legal and corporate documents, your financials, your team, your cap table, market data. And I'd say number 6 on here would be product, like screenshots, video of the product, some sort of product item. And looking at this list, it was like, what are some must-haves for a data room, and how does that change from pre-seed maybe to seed to seed? Like, how does it evolve over time?
Yeah. So again, it depends a lot on who the investor is you're talking with. That's probably the most popular case for a data room, talking with an investor, and you'll need one. If you're talking to an angel, they may not need really anything. It's their own money, and nobody is auditing their own money. So for example, when I angel invest, I never ask for these things. But as a firm, I definitely need to, because our firm is audited, and our auditors will literally go through every single portfolio company, and we'll check to make sure, is this a legit company? Like, have they incorporated, or are we just sending money to people's personal bank accounts, stuff like that. So at the minimum, firms will ask you for number 1 here, like incorporation docs. Where are you incorporated? Are the founders working for the company? Do you have employee, plans, contracts that you've signed? Is the IP that you're creating at the company assigned to the company, or can you have some rogue employee leave with the IP tomorrow and start a competitor firm? So those are the kinds of docs we're talking about in category number 1. Like basically, do you have a lawyer at this stage who has helped you with basic formation docs? And I know that everyone here is from literally all over the globe. But I would say that, for those of you who are working with Silicon Valley law firms or are based in Silicon Valley and have been connected with law firms around here, I think probably they're creating starter documents that will all check out just fine for number 1. A flag here, though, is for those of you who are outside of Silicon Valley and you found some lawyer. If your lawyer is not very experienced in working with startups, that can sometimes be a problem. They might be able to help you incorporate the company, but often I have seen actually, they're missing other pieces around, let's say, IP assignment or vesting schedules or shareholder agreements or things like that, because they're just not used to, startups in general. So that's just something to flag. And there are a lot of Silicon Valley law firms that will give you sort of free advice before you start paying them, like, maybe one free call or whatever, because they're looking for new clients always. And so my advice to you, if you're outside the Bay Area, is I would probably try to find a firm that does give free advice, just to have a lawyer take a look at what you have, if you've already incorporated and stuff, and make sure that everything's sufficient. And if it's not buttoned up, you may want to consider either immediately or at some point down the road switching, because there's often a lot of cleanup legal stuff that I see, especially with our companies that are based outside of Silicon Valley. So that's just one thing to flag about number 1. I think for things around number 3, I've kind of addressed, like that gets incorporated, with employee agreements and stuff into number 1. Number 2, financials, like, we invest in pre-seed companies, so very often companies don't have any revenue, so we don't dig into that. But certainly as you get up towards, let's say, Series A, a lot of investors, Series A investors, will ask you for financial projections. Certainly, what are the financials you're doing now, if you're making any money and if you have any expenditures. And so I think my general advice here, and we can talk more about this later, is I would keep it very light. Because I think the more information you have, especially around projections, the more that people can nitpick at, and that's a reason to pass. And then for cap table, I think a lot of investors will ask for that. I think in particular, what people are trying to ascertain is how clean is the cap table. So especially outside of Silicon Valley, I sometimes see advisors, take half of the company before it's even gotten started. And that's just not standard for what most investors are looking at or interested in, because we want the founders to be incentivized to run the company. So that's pretty much what people are looking at for the cap table. And number 5, I think that's sort of a nice to have.
Yeah, awesome. You mentioned some red flags. Any other red flags? One that comes to mind is if you do have financials or data in your data room, but it doesn't match other content you create, like your pitch deck that you used originally, that could be a red flag. If things are not lining up. Any other red flags that you'd call out?
If you have contracts that are signed, you'll want to put those contracts in the data room. And especially, so this, now I guess we're talking about companies that might be seed stage and beyond. And for those companies, if there's any discrepancy there, like it's not completely signed or it's pseudo signed or whatever, and it is different from what you claim, then that's going to be a red flag as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And then we'll make sure to send this out, but this is a checklist that the Hustle Bunch put together for data rooms. So we'll send this out. They've made this available, and you can check out some of the other items that you have in here. Oh, I want to talk about, I saw this actually this morning when I was previewing today. What about like board consent and board minutes? I mean, that's probably later stage company that have a board. Like what would you expect for in terms of board consent or board minutes to put into the data room?
For a pre-seed company, we don't care about it. And our checklist is actually way more exhaustive than we care about. But if, let's say, you're coming up on the Series A, that is going to be important if your board in particular is more than just you as the founder. So it depends a little bit on your board composition.
Yeah.
Like, let's say your board has an external person, like an investor or, some mentor or somebody, then you do want to have all your board notes and minutes, documented and kept in a folder.
Last question, we can kind of move on. We will move on to the next slide. Is there anything that would excite you if you saw it in a data room, or are you already at the point of excitement? You want to invest in the company, so what is in here now is not necessarily additive to my investment decision.
I can tell you that for founders who have already prepared a data room, and if it's clean, and by clean, what I mean, I just mean organized, like folders that are labeled properly. Like, I don't know, maybe there's a folder for incorporation docs, folder for employee agreements, folder for partner agreements, or whatever it is. That's impressive to me in itself, because the vast majority of companies, like I said, more than 90% that I run across, especially at this stage, have no data room. So I think if you have a data room that's organized, it's also a reflection of you, and that looks good. Like, the reflection is, oh, this person's organized. Oh, this person, is buttoned up and is detail oriented. So I think that's sort of the unspoken thing. Like, okay, yes, part of it is about the content that's actually in the folder, but I think the other part about it is just the attention to detail and how does it reflect on you as a founder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this was a quote that I'll send this other blog post out that the Hustle Fund crew put together around why they're important. But I think you mentioned that as an investor, you can expect that the way founders keep track of their documents is reflective of the way they run their companies. I mean, we for sure have seen that play out with the other side of our business with investor updates. If you're sending investor updates out, that reflects on how you're running your company. And so, yeah, this I think really resonates with me as well. Should a well-organized data room, would you expect a cover letter or any other document, just like a README, just like, hey, here's how things are laid out, or it should be simple enough where you can poke around and kind of understand what's happening within the room itself?
Either or. Actually, I think a README is a great idea, because over time your data room is going to have more stuff in it. And so, if you just update the README and maybe have links to various things, then that would be super helpful. I mean, I think data rooms in general, as a founder, I used to think, oh, this feels like busy work and it's just extra stuff I need to do that's not relevant to my business. But the reality is, actually, it's a good process for you as a founder, where if you do it once, then you can send it out super easily to so many people. And especially if you're thinking about raising money, and if you are raising from many investors, or rather you're having a lot of investors look at your company, then it is way easier to just send out one link than to try to attach files left and right every single time to your emails and send them to investors. So I do think it's actually a way to create better processes within your own company.
Yeah, personally, I mean, I've tried to have this idea for myself with an always on data rooms, that if any time I needed to raise money or sell the business or do something, everything's already there and I can just send it. It's even useful for not that. I found it just throughout the year, you'll deal with things as a founder, whether it's recently tax or insurance or any of the other kind of operational back office type stuff. A lot of that stuff's in your data room that you can just pull out, like bylaws. You need bylaws for something. And so it's really helpful to be organized. It just makes your time more scalable as well. So that's a plug on just the day-to-day of having a data room set up.
100%. Yeah.
We talk about sharing, a link, share it out. Let's talk about when. You're going through a fundraising process. Is this something I'm going to do once an investor says, here's a term sheet, we want to get in your data room? Are you going to share it before the term sheet because they want to understand something else about the company before they make an investment decision? How do you think about using the data room as a vehicle for ultimately getting the check wired into the business?
Yeah, I think my general perspective on fundraising is I wouldn't overshare. So I wouldn't be cagey about information, but I also wouldn't overshare because, you know, at this in startups, like nothing really looks great for the most part. And so the more you overshare, the more you might scare somebody away. But certainly if somebody is asking you for your data room, I would just go ahead and send it at that point in time. Or if someone asks you, you know, hey, not even necessarily your data room specifically, but like, hey, you know, can I look at your contracts that you've got signed, then you can send that link over, right? Or maybe the link to the folder in the data room on contracts or something like that. So that's how I would use it. I wouldn't proactively after a meeting say, oh, here's our data room. Because you might be opening a whole can of worms that's unnecessary, but investors will ask you if they are really interested at some point. At least VCs will. Angels may not.
Yeah. And what people should I expect to share my data room with? Like, am I going to share it with you, Elizabeth, or will I share it with associates in addition to yourself? Like, who should I expect sharing my data room with at a venture fund?
It really depends actually on the fund. Certainly, I think for the larger funds, my guess is that associates probably go through all that. Not having worked at a large fund, I wouldn't actually know, but that's what I would guess, like somebody who is checking the boxes to make sure this is a legit company, et cetera. You know, at Hustle Fund, we have a system where we ask founders to submit their data room, and then whoever's the lead, you know, investor on that just does like a very cursory check to make sure the things that will be asked for by our auditors are there, and that's it. So I think, again, stage wise and also the size of the firm matters a lot in terms of what they're looking for in the data room. We're at pre-seed, so there's not going to be a whole lot there, but we need to know that we are investing in actual companies rather than people's bank accounts.
Yeah, awesome. Let's get to some Q&A. And let me pull up the questions we have here. Thank you for starting to write some of these in. First question. You're a pre-seed investor. Do you help your current portfolio companies put together a data room for future rounds, or offer any guidance with current portfolio founders that might be raising their seed round?
We help our portfolio companies with fundraising in general. I think we spend most of our time helping them with the storytelling of their blurb and deck. And we also do introductions to investors. I think my general thinking about data rooms is everyone should have one, but you don't need to spend too much time on it. So we don't spend a whole lot of time on that. And especially at this stage where we are, even the stage after us, where our portfolio companies are, you know, maybe raising a seed round or seed plus round, the data room is still fairly light. So I think the short answer is no, we don't really spend a lot of time in helping our companies with their data rooms, but we help them with fundraising in general, and usually the parts where people get more tripped up.
Yeah. We had a participant write in, hi, I'm in conversations with venture firms right now. Someone asked me about the culture of our startup. Should that be included in the data room? If yes, where? And if not, what would be the appropriate way to talk about the culture of your startup?
The culture. Wow, I've never heard that one before. So one thing I would flag, that is something that we've added to our checklist, which is, I think, an interesting area is, let's say that your company has been in litigation, or you know, has been accused of something or other, or if a founder has been accused of sexual harassment or things like that. Those things might be questions that come up from potential investors. So I think, I don't know if this culture question is related to any of this, or whether somebody just wants to know, like, what is the culture of this company in general, but those are things that you should be prepared to answer if you have had any of those sorts of issues, or something, you know, something along those lines that investors would care about. And I don't know if you want to preemptively put that in a data room, but you should at least have those materials prepared for yourself to send out to investors in case you get questions about it. Yeah.
What about culture in terms of mission, vision, values, and having those? You want to be aligned with investors as it relates to your values. Is that something that would be teased out before you send a data room, or helpful to include?
I've actually never seen that in anybody's data rooms, and I've never heard any investor ask that
Okay.
before. So this is an unusual ask, I would say.
Okay. We talked about some of the documents we highlighted earlier. Do you share all of these voluntarily, or each section just only upon request? So like if someone says, hey, I want to see your corporation docs, send just those, or send the data room you have set up?
I mean, I would just send whatever is asked. So it might be a link to a subfolder within the data room. But if somebody's asking you, hey, can you send me your data room in general, I would send them everything.
Yeah. What about customer references and referrals? Demonstrating how much customers love your company.
That's a question that a lot of investors will ask. And here's the tricky part. If you're pitching a lot of investors, which you probably are, a bunch of people might ask you for that. And, even if you have awesome customers, none of your customers are going to love doing like 5 calls. So how do you kind of navigate that? So here's what I would do. Like, number one, I would actually just be very direct with an investor asking you that and say, hey, would absolutely be happy to introduce you to a customer or two or whatever. However, as you can imagine, we are pitching a number of investors and other people are making that ask. And our customers can't be inundated with so many investors calling them all the time. So I want to make that the very last step in the process. And so I want to make sure that everything else checks out for you and that you are fully committed pending a customer call, and that we get through everything else. So that way we don't annoy these other people. I would just be very direct and honest with them. So that's thought number one. Thought number two, I think it's also perfectly fine to phrase it as, so I think your ideal is to connect your investors with one-on-one calls with your customers, whoever's there at the very end. However, if you still feel like, gosh, I only have 2 customers and now each one is going to get 10 calls. Another thought is to try to do a group call, but I would be very careful about doing a group call because you don't want your investors to know you don't want the prospective investors to know who the others are, because then they may end up, colluding or talking each other out of the deal or whatever it is. So I think if you do a group call, then you have to be very careful that in the group call, like, everyone can't see who everyone else is. They can ask questions, but they can't see who else is on the call and stuff like that. So that's another option. So that way your customers are not inundated with so many calls.
What about, yeah, that's really interesting. What about if you would, some of the pre-work of just, if I recorded a Loom or a Zoom with like a customer on a customer call and including that in my data room, would that help alleviate some of that time you're taking from customers, assuming investors okay watching that?
100%. The only thing I would say about that is, your prospective investors may have different questions. And also, again, you don't want to like send over an hour-long conversation with your customer either, nor do you want your customer to kind of, talk too much, right? Like if, let's say your product is half-baked, but it's still useful to your customer and your customer talks about how it's half-baked, that might also work against you. So I think I would just be very careful with that. Like maybe another strategy is, hey, I'm going to field all the questions from investors, send it by this date, and then your customer can record the answers, and then you can cut them up and then send out the video snippets to all of them. So that's another way to handle that. But yeah, like that's some work for everybody.
Yep. Let's see, we got a ton of questions coming in. Let me see if we can start filtering some of these. Let's see, what's a good one here? Do you suggest that pre-seed companies have things like insurance and audited financials when raising a pre-seed round?
For a pre-seed company, probably not audited financials. I imagine you're not making that much money to begin with, and so I suspect that your investors probably believe you.
Yep.
But I think it also, I say that cautiously because I think it also depends a bit on geography. Like if you're raising for local investors and you're outside the Valley, I have certainly heard pre-seed investors ask for all kinds of things. But I think the honest answer is I would probably not spend the money doing all of that, at least at the pre-seed stage.
Yep. Should you ever be concerned about giving access to your data room for investors that you don't know well, but have asked access to your data room?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Is it somebody that you're actively pitching, or are you?
We'll see if this person writes back in and I can get some clarification on that
Okay.
one. Let's see. Should I ask for an NDA to get access to our data room?
No VC will sign an NDA.
There we go. That is super easy. What else do we have here? How about some hustle fund questions? I got a couple of those now coming in.
Sure.
All right. How much of the company percentage-wise does hustle fund take for $50,000? So basically they're asking probably valuation range here for the types of companies you're backing.
Yeah, it really depends a lot on the company, the stage, the geography, the space, etc. I think the short answer is if we are the first ones to the table and no terms are set, and we want to make you an offer, we'll make you an offer, and then we'll just discuss with the founder directly whether that's something you want to do or not. So I think, unfortunately, we're not an accelerator, so we don't have standard terms, and our terms are literally all over the board because companies have all kinds of situations.
What's the highest valuation and lowest valuation you've ever done? Are you comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, sure. The lowest was 250K post, and the highest was 32 post.
Okay, so there we go. There's the range you can work off of.
So I think giving more clarity around this, I would say if I had to guess, and I could pull up the data, probably 90% plus of our companies are somewhere between 3 and 7 post, but it depends a lot on geography. Like certainly Silicon Valley prices are a lot higher. And then certainly if you're outside the US, it's a lot lower.
Yep. Should we include previous investor updates in our data room?
You could, but I feel like that's a nice to have.
Yep. What other questions we got here? Oh, we got someone, she wrote back in about the question of sharing with someone that I do not know well. Yes, actively pitching investors. They just don't happen to know this investor well. Would you have any concern sharing a data room if you're actively pitching, you don't know the investor well? I guess it depends what well means, right? Because with Hustle Fund, I don't know how many calls you'd have, but you guys make a decision pretty quick. So I might not know you super well.
Yeah.
Through my data room.
And that's what that's exactly it. I think especially at pre-seed and seed, the way fundraisers tend to go is, you might do one conversation or a couple of conversations with an investor. And I would say you probably don't know that investor very well. At least I would not consider that to be knowing them well, including ourselves. We make a decision typically after one conversation. But I think the reality is if they're going to be an investor in your company, they are signing up to essentially be a partner to you. So you have to make a decision as a founder if someone makes you an offer, like whether on a gut feeling you want to partner with this person or not. And that includes everything, your data. I mean, the data room is the least of your worries. If they are a bad partner, like they can make your life miserable in many ways. Like somebody can call you up every day, every minute, right? Like there are all kinds of ways people can be annoying to you that have nothing to do with your data room. So I think there is a level of trust that has to happen in fundraising. And that's, that is what fundraising is about, like both ways. There's certainly plenty of founders we have backed where, they were not who we thought they were. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Putting my founder hat on, I would say, if you're asking the question because you have a bad feeling or a red flag about the investor, that probably says enough where you might not want to share the data room with them. If it's simply, I'm just getting to know this person, I think it's probably very safe if you're sharing, what we talked about today. Ultimately, they should do no harm to you if they're backing you. So that's
100%.
how I think about that.
And just along those lines, if your spidey senses are like, I don't trust this person, I think you should end the process right there. Like, never mind the data room, just like, just like cut it off. Like you don't need to take somebody's money.
Yeah. What about speaking of, just different asks, like, are there, if you putting kind of on the flip side, would there be things investors are asking for that would raise your spidey senses or red flags, putting your founder hat on, as it comes to this part of diligence?
Yeah, I think there are two categories of spidey sense issues with investors. One is, okay, this investor may be a good person, and this person, might be honest or whatever and trustworthy, but this investor is just a pain in the butt and is asking me for so much stuff and so much homework and all that. That's one category of investor, and that's probably the vast majority of investors. The other category of investor is, I really don't trust this person at all. Like, this person seems like a creep. This person seems like they are spying on my company to try to get information for somebody else's company or something like that, right? Like, this person, I don't trust them. So there are kind of two categories of, like, I don't trust this person. That's one group. And then there's a category of, this person's just a pain in my side. So I think if you're in the category of like, oh, I don't trust this person, I don't know why, but this seems like a bad person, cut it off. If it's like the other category, which is a big category, because there are a lot of investors, especially outside the Valley, who ask for a lot of homework, then I think you have to make a call as a founder. Like, I would never advise my portfolio to say no and cut it off, because sometimes you don't have a choice and you really need the money. But I think you should just go into it eyes wide open, like, okay, this person, I might need to manage my time with them because they may constantly be calling me about stuff. And I think the way to manage that is just to be like very direct with them and say, hey, would love to help you get to where you need to and get all the information you need. But, I am running a company. And so I want to make sure that we're using our time in the wisest way. Like, get me the full list of things you need. Let's get your questions answered. And then, let me know whether you're in or out. So I would just like manage them very well if they're in that category.
Do you, for the people that kind of drag out diligence or getting on multiple calls, is that ever like a signal to you, like, oh, this person's really not going to invest, but they're just trying to find a way, they're trying to find a way not to invest? Like, is that ever a signal, or are some people just that needy when it comes to getting on multiple calls, diligence, things like that?
Yeah. I'd say probability wise, they probably will not come in, but I've seen it happen like on rare occasion. And so this is where I think probability wise, you're probably going to waste your time. And this is why you need to manage that time really well with these people, because it's probably not the best use of time. You're probably going to waste it.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we got 7 minutes left and we have a ton of questions, which is great. If we don't get to all of the questions, we'll try to shoot you guys emails. We have this written down, or you can just email me and I'll do our best to get it and answer your way. There's been a lot of questions about which provider to use for the data room. I hate doing this because it feels, I will plug Visible for 1 second, just because we just launched it. So we did build the data room product. It's pretty amazing. We talked to hundreds of founders, and it lets you really understand, one, our investors view my data room, two, make it dead simple to update documents that already exist. And it all integrates with the Visible platform if you are fundraising. But that goes against some of my ethos. So you could also use Notion, you can use Google Drive, you could use a zip file and attach it. I think there's plenty of tools you could use out there for your data room product. But I would hate, since there's like 5 questions about it, not to at least mention Visible. Are there any tools, Elizabeth, that you would say you would not use, or are you comfortable just as long as I see structured folders and organized? That's all I care about.
Yeah, that's all I care about.
Yeah. Great. What about kind of related to updating documents? Say I have a 3-month fundraise, I'm starting in June. it's now March. Should I continue to update documents in my data room or leave them as is from when I started the raise? That question came in.
You should definitely update them, because let's say you pitch me in June and I see, your information only goes up to March. One, it doesn't reflect well on you as a founder. But two, also, I start to wonder, because investors are very skeptical people. I start to wonder, like, oh gosh, did the business just totally crater in March and they didn't have any sales? They didn't have any new things happen. Like, March was their best month. That's how investors think about things. So I would continue to update it. I don't think you have to go crazy and update it every day or even necessarily every week, but if your raise is going on 2 or 3 months, you should.
Yeah, and don't put the date of the when you made the deck in the deck name too. That's another dead giveaway. Just delete that when you're raising money. There's 2 more good just fundraising related questions, and you're such an expert. I would love to get these before we wrap up. Rachel wrote in, should we share most favored nation caveats up front when raising money from new investors?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Rachel, if you're still here, feel free to elaborate some more. What is your view on a venture investor that's already invested in a close competitor? Is there too much risk to proceed? Talking about fundraising and starting to give access to the data room.
Yeah, so this is a good call out. And this goes back to, is somebody just trying to look at your information to spy on you, or are they legit interested? So I would just actually ask them in a nice way. I would just ask them, hey, I noticed that you're an investor in X. Just kind of wanted to get your sense of whether you feel like it's too close, or, whether this is something that you would seriously be able to consider, or something like that. Just be very direct about it. Because I actually have seen, especially for investors who are specialty investors, right? Like a fintech investor, an ed tech investor, of course, all of your investments are going to be somewhat close. They're all in the same category. So, but even for generalists, like, one of our portfolio companies raised from Sequoia, and they had a portfolio company that we thought was pretty close. And we, our portfolio company asked about it, and they did the investment. And it turned out not to be too close after all.
Yeah. So we got a little bit of elaboration. We had an initial investor for pre-seed. They had a most favored nation terms on any future rounds. Should we let other investors know?
No, I don't think you need to, unless you're asked about it. But what it means for you, what that essentially means is, like, let's say that you raise from a future investor and the terms are now worse than before. Just for everyone to know, what most favored nation clauses mean is that investors who have that in their documents get the best terms that are out there going forward. So that means that if you thought you raised at a 5 cap and now your valuation has dropped down to 3, the people who were at 5 have also now dropped down to 3. So that's just for you to know. Now, the way that I would play that is, let's say that a newer investor comes along and says, I would do this at 3. I think you can push back and say, we have an MFN with prior investors, and that will, cause everyone to go down to 3. And unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to do that. Like, you could say something like that, but I wouldn't preemptively bring it up unless it's something that, comes into play.
Yep. This would be maybe a hot take question. So we'll end here. Do you think startups should be burdened with providing ESG policies in their data room and implementing these in their operations? I'm assuming this means that investors are probably have some sort of ESG component to their thesis and are requiring it, is my guess. Like, should startups have to put those in their data room is the gist I'm getting from this question.
Yeah, this really goes back to who you're raising from. The vast majority of VCs, especially in software, don't have anything like that or any requirements. And so I would say no. That being said, like, let's say you're investing from a bunch of, let's say, impact family offices or something for your climate idea, that actually may be a very common ask, in which case I would put that in there. So it kind of depends again. And I think I would start with not putting it in there, but then if you start getting that request a bunch, then put it in there. And then, you'll just have that in your process.
Yeah, there we go. Give us a state of the union on the current fundraising market. 2021, was pretty insane for founders, and I think in a good way. What are you seeing now this year? Like terms we haven't seen before or haven't seen in a while from investors downstream from you guys? Like where is the market today?
I think for pre-seed and seed, it's very active. I'm not seeing too many changes. Valuations have dropped and it's slower, but I wouldn't say it's crazy on any front. Like it's not crazy bad. It was just always hard to raise, I think, for most people. So if you're in pre-seed seed, I wouldn't worry about it. Again, it always comes back to like, is your company in a good spot to be fundraising? Obviously, pre-idea or pre much of anything is always hard. I think if you're coming up on your seed plus or your series A and beyond, it is really hard. And this is where you have to be super buttoned up. Your deck story has to be nearly perfect. Your data room should be nearly perfect. And you need to run a very tight process of meeting lots of investors. Frankly speaking, I'm just really not seeing a lot of institutional investors invest at the series A and beyond. A lot of them are very concerned about their own portfolio companies that are already in their portfolio. So most of, our best companies, if they are raising, tend to be raising from insiders at that stage and beyond, just to get them to Q3 or Q4 to be able to go back out to the market. So if you don't need to raise right now and it's easier for you to make money off of revenue or consulting or through events or whatever it is, I would probably do that. And I would come back to the market in Q3. That's my general advice to our own portfolio.
What about, okay, last question now that you said that. Pre-seed, seed, you said a little bit more, deals are still getting done. If I'm thinking about my raise, should I raise more money than maybe I would have, knowing that like the downstream investors are just not doing deals or they're taking slow? Like, should I give myself more cushion if I'm raising a pre-seed or seed round?
My general perspective is to try to raise money when it's easiest. And I know it's never easy, but I would say now is not a great time for easiest for all, parts of the stack, because at pre-seed and seed, although deals are still getting done, they're super slow. It's like, it takes twice as long as, let's say, this time last year. Yeah. So if you're now thinking, well, instead of raising $500,000, I'm raising $1 million because I want to make sure I have extra buffer, it might take you until like August to raise $1 million. I'm not saying it will. There's certainly companies that are getting it done faster, but I'm just saying, like, if it used to take 4 months to get something done, it now takes 8. So you might as well just like bring in whatever you need to get you through to August and then go back out and raise again, rather than spinning your wheels right now with, your early story, your early traction right now.
Yeah. Well, we'll end it there. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everyone for joining. This is our highest registration event ever. You can see why. Elizabeth has a ton of amazing insights. Thank you for sharing those with us. Thank you for the questions. Again, we had so many that we weren't gonna be able to get to all. So if you look, my email is mike@visible.vc. Feel free to email me. I'll try to answer it or find someone smarter than me to answer it for you. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.